Welcome back to a special episode of React Native Radio Podcast. This is a crossover episode between us and Callstack's podcast, The React Native Show. Jamon recorded this live in Poland during the React Native EU conference. Enjoy.
Łukasz, do you think that your audience on your podcast are going to be confused when it's my voice coming in first?
I'm not sure, but we can check. I'm Łukasz, and he's Jamon.
Yes.
And usually Jamon is on the React Native radio, which I'm a fan of for years and years.
Yeah.
And usually I'm a host of the React Native Show podcast,
right,
with a long name. And together today, we are doing a crossover episode.
Yes, and I'm super excited to do this. We've been planning it for a while.
Yeah.
It's been something that's, some back and forth going on. These are basically the two biggest podcasts in the React Native space. And of course, we tend to do our own thing usually, but we've been talking about different topics we could take on. So excited about this though. And we are over here in Poland, React Native EU, which just wrapped up. It's been awesome.
Yeah, and that's I think I need to explain my voice. I usually sound better if you from React Native Radio and you go to our feed. I sound better usually, but it is what it is. We had 2 days of amazing talks.
Yes.
Before that we had a core contributor summit which we attended.
That was amazing.
And for the past 3 days we've been collecting some news, some threads, some currents in the React Native ecosystem, and we've decided to just go for it. Just records as we stand with little preparation. So excuse us for maybe not being on 100% factual, maybe, and I don't know if you know, but probably we are not allowed to speak freely about all of the things that we know from Contributor Summit.
Yeah. Yeah, I really wish we could, because there's some really interesting things that kind of came up there. But I guess just to explain to our listeners what we're talking about here, the people from the various partner companies with React Native, not just companies like Meta and Microsoft, but also, Callstack, Infinite Red, Software Mansion, Shopify.
Yeah.
All these companies, we got together and had various workshops and topics, working groups, where we discussed some of the big pressing topics for React Native, what is really important to all of us. And I thought it was great. It was really cool to meet with all these people and see where people are going. And I learned a lot, I know, and it will affect what we bring to the table with our open source. I know that Callstack, I'm sure, will do the same.
Yeah, for me, the experience was even more magnified, because you are on those committees for a while now. And for me, it was a first year joining the Core Contributor Summit. And like you said, we've been discussing problems, maybe pressing problems, but also some nice additions that we want to do, and the React Native going forward in 1 year, 2 years into the future. And I think our clients, you're from Infinite Red, we are from Callstack.
Yeah.
Our clients trust us to know those things, to guide them through that that ecosystem that is evolving out there, but we are not free to talk about this. So maybe we should start talk about it.
Yeah, let's move on to the next thing.
So like I said, that's not new news, right? Maybe some of them are. We don't want to do we react to news right now.
My listeners will know that that's a common thing that we do from time to time. This will resemble that a little bit, but it's not necessarily brand new news. We're revisiting some topics.
Okay, maybe let's just go in. The first topic is new debugger experience.
Yeah,
and with this, which we got an announcement from the main stage 2 days ago, Flipper dropping from React Native. Not dropping the support, but not being included from 0.74 in the React Native init.
In the React Native init, the main template, which also would include something like Ignite, which are Infinite Red puts out Ignite, which is a boilerplate that builds upon the React Native CLI, which Callstack maintains. Basically, Flipper. It was interesting. What was the crowd reaction when they announced that Flipper was not going to be in the main?
I was surprised on the one hand, and on the other, it felt like I could relate.
Yeah,
everyone was clapping.
Yeah,
everyone was clapping from the Flipper dropping from React Native.
Right,
and like Flipper is an amazing tool.
It is. It really is.
Huge community of add-ons and plugins, and like it allows you to debug your React Native really well, but it has a lot of issues.
It does, and that's the thing. Like, you wouldn't think that we would be clapping, applauding the removal of a debugging tool when that's actually we need more of. We need more debugging tools. We need more tools. But the problem with Flipper was that it was very invasive. It did things like extend your build times a lot of times. It would not work in certain cases. It would sometimes make your app not work when you weren't even trying to use Flipper.
Yeah.
And it would be unresponsive sometimes. I don't want to, get on the Flipper team. That was never really their priority. They were a native debugging tool, native performance tool. And
we were really grateful to get a support for React Native a few years ago. But bundling it by default created a lot of problems for a lot of people, especially for those that didn't want to use Flipper.
That's right.
Didn't want to have anything to do with it. And like you said, React Native drops one tool from default, but they're giving us something in exchange for that.
That's right. That's the new debugger. And the new debugger is going to be based on Chrome debugger, which a lot of people are more used to. It's more of a web tool. But it will connect into React Native and allow you to debug using the most familiar tool that you can have, which is the Chrome debugger. I really like this. I like this step. It's a move in the right direction. Of course, Infinite Red has put out Reactatron for a long time, which is a cool tool. It has a few things built into it, including logging and network inspector, state inspector. It has some performance tools built in. They're fairly minimal, but they're in there.
I think what you also have is the overlay on top of the
that's right.
It's so good.
You can put an image, like a screenshot of what the designer wants.
It's a way to do a pixel perfect design.
Yes, exactly. So there's some cool tools there, but we haven't invested a ton into Reactatron. So there's much more that needs to be brought to the table, and really Chrome debugger is going to be that.
So the main selling point for the new debugger is that it actually runs on the phone. Runs JavaScript either on the physical device or in the simulator, and not in the Chrome, not in the web browser.
Exactly, and it's because, like, in the past, you could use the Chrome debugger, but it was running the JavaScript in an environment.
V8.
It was on V8.
Yeah.
And so there were some things that it wouldn't perform the same. You couldn't actually affect. So get this, Luca. This is awesome. If you actually attach something to, like, the global object, the global this or whatever, and then run it in the terminal, like run that function, it will affect what's on your simulator. It's amazing that you could actually do that.
Yeah,
like
right now.
Yeah,
with the new debugger.
Exactly.
Yeah. The case that I had with the old debugging with Chrome was that the Moment.js was just, I couldn't reproduce my bugs that were happening on the device. I couldn't reproduce them in the debugger. Right now, I can, but Moment.js is, I think, of the past, I think. It's from like a few years ago.
But that's a good example, where it's just a different environment. Now we'll be running the same environment.
Yeah. So that was the new debugging experience and the Flipper dropping. The next topic is a heavy one.
So there was a question from the audience in the Q&A panel here at React Native.
Maybe we can explain. At the end of the 2 days of talks, we had a panel. Nicola Corti was there from the core team. Eli White, Mike Pieszchała from Callstack, and Caleb from Microsoft, Wojtek and Charlotte.
Yeah.
And they were answering questions from the public gathered throughout the conference about the state of React Native, the future of React Native, and the future of React Native is what this question is about.
Yeah. The question was, when is React Native 1.0 going to be landing?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because the
Eli
answer...
was sweating. Eli was sweating.
You can see him. So like, essentially the answer is, it's when the community really makes it happen, when the community can commit to it. Because it's not, 1.0 isn't really about a feature set. I mean, that's maybe part of it, but it's really about a culture and a mindset. And I'll just ask you, like, when you think 1.0, what are you thinking in terms of the culture and the mindset of the React Native community?
So exactly what Eli, I'm going to echo what he said on the stage. He said, we don't want to just give you a number, because if nothing changes with that number, the number doesn't matter. We want to bring stability. We want to bring everyone to the same architecture.
Yes.
He didn't say new architecture. He said the same architecture. We want the processes to be stable. We don't want to, like, Nicola Corti had a talk about how I broke React Native from the last November, I think, when the React Native stopped working for all of the people on Android for a few days. So he said, we don't want that in 1.0. So, yeah, the expectation is that we will then treat React Native as a product that you could imagine yourself paying for a license, basically.
Yeah.
You expect it to work, and it works reliably.
Yeah. And stability, API stability, this isn't, it's not just for React Native upgrades. That's part of it. But it's also for the third-party ecosystem. The third-party, like building libraries that hook into React Native. If we know that there's going to be some API stability moving forward, we can commit to those APIs, and we're not going to have to release breaking changes to our libraries in order to stay up with React Native. That's a huge thing, because a lot of times it's like, hey, I want to move up to 72, to 73, to 74. Well, in order to do that, I need to upgrade all of these other packages in order to get up there. That might actually be a thing when we go 1.0, but then after that, hopefully it will settle down.
Yeah, and this is what he said as well, that we want to keep on one for a while.
Yeah.
We don't want breaking changes every 3 months or something. And we have that now. Maybe those are not as big over the past few releases, but still, like you say, maintainers of libraries, they don't have too nice time with React Native right now over the past year or two.
And the other thing, and you probably noticed this with your clients as well, sometimes clients will come to us, or prospective clients, like sales leads will come to us and say, well, we're thinking about React Native. The only thing is, it's not 1.0. So can we really trust it? It sounds like it's beta software. So this is also a commitment to the broader just ecosystem of companies that want to commit to React Native. But if it's not 1.0, it feels more shaky.
Yeah, the warranty should be in place, basically. Batteries included.
Batteries included. I like
So yeah, React Native 1.0. It's not going to be soon. But we will get there as a community, and we can go next. And next is not something that's new, but something that has been around for years and years. And actually, I don't know if you know that, you probably do. Expo was created even before React Native was released.
Yeah,
I've heard that.
Yeah, I heard that from Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie was saying that.
And they were trying to build something like React Native. And when React Native came out, they said, this is what we're looking for, but let's put a layer on top of it. Really cool story.
Okay, so Expo story.
Yeah.
Hardcore React Native developers, they have suspicion about it, let's say.
Yeah.
They don't know what to think about it. They like CLI, they like bare bones, they like Ignite. Ignite comes with Expo now.
It does now.
Yeah, but it doesn't used to.
Didn't used to, yeah.
And I was the same. honestly, a year ago.
Yeah.
But then I watched a lot of great talks from Up.js. I interviewed some people working on Expo Router, working on new debugger, which was introduced in Expo first, I think. And I think it's important to explain what Expo was and what Expo is now.
Yeah, Expo initially was more what you think of with Expo Go, where everything was included. And if it wasn't included from a native standpoint, you were kind of out of luck. It was really just JavaScript. And
it was either all or nothing.
All of or nothing. And then you had to eject if anything went, even just one little line of native code that you needed. Over time, that has changed to now, obviously, things like config plugins and Expo pre-build. At Chain React this year, Keith Kirok from Expo, the Expo team, gave a great talk titled "Not Your Grandparents' Expo."
Aw,
it's a great title.
Yeah.
And what he essentially was talking about was that evolution going from we're going to be sort of like a dumbed down version of React Native to being a fully capable, any native code you want through config plugins, through different workflows, but still having that Expo Go experience when you just want to show something to someone without having to touch native code.
Like a PR review.
Yeah, absolutely. And minimal repros and whatnot.
So I think what's the general misconception is that we still have that all or nothing, but we don't.
Yeah.
What we have now is a bucket of different utilities that you can mix and match. You can use one and not the other, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And those can really, really, really improve your workflow.
Yeah. And the way to think about it is normally you go in there and you edit native files in iOS or Android. And when you do that, you're sort of running the risk of making your upgrades more complex, of maybe not doing it quite right, not really being able to share what you've done other than snippets and git diffs, where config plugins allow you to basically write a script that will generate your whole native folder. And you can delete those folders and regenerate them anytime you want with new parameters. And that's a really easier thing to not mess up, because when you do an upgrade, you can upgrade and then regenerate everything and you're good to go. But you still have all the customizations that you need.
It's really, really powerful.
Yeah.
I saw that in some other React Native-esque things that in my project, we used to not have the folders, the builds. We used to create the build every time we wanted. And that's the case with Expo right now.
Right.
So what do you say from consulting experience, from talking with your clients? Do you have a lot of clients using Expo? And how about clients that don't want Expo at all?
So a year ago, almost nobody was using Expo. But that sort of changed. I don't know if there's a specific point, but we started recommending Expo even to our bigger clients, more greenfield stuff. And we currently have 3 projects going using Expo to varying degrees, other than just like Expo modules of various, we use those in almost every project. But Expo itself, like the whole pipeline, including EAS, config plugins, all of that, we actually have 3 projects doing that, which is really, really interesting and very cool. So I would say about a year ago, it changed. And there are still clients who come to us who are maybe not open to using Expo. That is still the case. But we're slowly changing their minds over time. I think it's a process. How about you at Callstack?
I need to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You are a CTO of one of the partner companies. I'm just a technical leader for one of the projects. I don't have such overview of our projects, but from my development perspective, again, a year ago, I was really skeptical, and I had the same experience that I had 5 years ago or something. Right now, I use it. Like I use this in my personal hobby projects, like Weather app and To Do app and all that. And yeah, I'm a believer now. And I'm gonna sell it to everyone. And it was also like mentioned during the Q&A at the end of the conference that all of those 6 people sitting there, really like industry expert, industry leaders, they recommend everyone using Expo. And if you at any point don't want to stick with it, you can just generate and you can just adjust.
Yeah, I really like that connection between React Native and Expo itself, where it really is a tight partnership. Expo is React Native, and it's just a layer on top of it that'll really eases all the developer experience. So we're definitely seeing it turn a corner now, and there's really no downside. Like there are certain things, maybe some trade-offs, but you don't have to use EAS. You don't have to, like, that's how
Expo makes pay for it.
Right? Yeah, it's free. It's open source. They have tons of open source. They have tons of third-party plugins that are really well maintained. So yeah. Do you want to talk about Expo Router or?
I was thinking about closing the Expo discussion. Expo Router
That makes sense.
and Expo Image, amazing libraries.
They are,
but I don't have really much takes on it. Apart from
They're very new. So yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
Next topic, which is new. I knew about this a few months ago.
Yeah.
And actually talking with some very, very smart people in the networking around coffee table, I spoke with someone who just found it in the repository of Hermes.
Yeah, because it's been actually public, but sort of like hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
For a while.
Because who is going through the Hermes repositories looking for new branches?
Right.
And the branch name was Static Hermes.
Static Hermes.
Yeah. And we got an announcement just today. And I couldn't be on the talk. I know some things about it.
Yeah.
I couldn't be on the talk. So if you can please let me know what Svetan was talking about.
So it's a fantastic talk. You should definitely watch it if it's out on YouTube by the time this lands. But essentially what Static Hermes, so Hermes itself is an interpreter. It's like a JavaScript engine, and it converts JavaScript into bytecode and then runs that bytecode. But it's still an interpreter. It's not running like native machine code.
Yeah.
What Static Hermes is native machine code. It's not converted to bytecode. There's no interpreter. It's running as is. It's standalone. And it's using JavaScript, specifically TypeScript or Flow. And the reason it needs TypeScript, you can't just use JavaScript, is because it needs all that type information in order to compile to... That's one of the things that's very hard about JavaScript. Like compile, you might wonder, like, why don't we have a static version of JavaScript? Like, why can't you just compile it down? Well, that's very hard to do with an untyped language.
Yeah.
So by having strict static typing with TypeScript or Flow, they can infer the types from that, and then they can actually compile it down to machine code, which where this it doesn't necessarily replace the JavaScript that you're using on your front end, but where this would replace is mainly if you were to get to a certain point in you're kind of like looking at your performance and you're narrowing it down, and you finally find out that the Hermes interpreter is really your bottleneck. It's too slow for something. Maybe something, I heard an example of someone who was trying to do an encryption algorithm. So when that happens in the past or up till now, your only recourse would have been to write it in C++. Because C++ would, I mean, you could write it in, I guess, Swift and Kotlin, but really C++.
Yeah, if you want the best possible performance, you go as close to the metal as possible.
Exactly. And also C++ is cross-platform, so you were able to run it on Android and iOS. So C++, but we're JavaScript developers, we're TypeScript developers. We would rather write that. Yeah. So Hermes, Static Hermes, will allow us to write TypeScript, compile it as if it's C++, and run it on both iOS and Android. And it's incredibly fast. It's up to 20 times faster than your typical interpreted bytecode. There are some trade-offs. You can't just write any TypeScript you want. There's some rules around that. I mean, I suppose you could, but you end up with performance penalties that make it not worth it.
Well, I guess TypeScript can be really complicated.
Yes.
You can do a generic of a generic of a generic, maybe, and that might be hard for a compiler to.
Interestingly, it's actually the opposite. The generics actually help the compiler quite a bit. But what's really hard is when you type something as let's say let user : user, like capital U user. but it's actually undefined. You can't do that if you want maximum performance, because you really need it to be actually like a user or to type it as user or undefined. So a union. So stuff like that is actually the sort of the limitations around it, but it's a lot easier than learning C++.
Oh, yeah.
So you can learn sort of the rules around it. It's not ready yet.
It's highly experimental.
Yes, very experimental, but they're making progress. He even showed a screenshot of compiling a command line, just a binary that you can just run on your command line. So that's kind of cool. You don't necessarily need to even run it in your React Native app. He said don't do this, but people will.
My take about this is it's great. I've heard people talking, I think people from Meta talking that they already have plans to, like, obviously, if this works, they will include it in Facebook. My hope is that I don't have to do anything. I just have to bump Flipper, the Hermes, and it will generate the necessary bytecode for me from the things that it can. It will leave the places that it cannot alone, and it will just interpret it in the runtime.
So I think by default, it will not behave any differently than even if you bump it. I don't think it'll behave any differently. You have to kind of opt into this behavior. And why wouldn't you just write everything then in static Hermes? Well, there is a bit of a performance, or sorry, not a performance. There is a bit of a cost in developer experience. Because when you have a crash, you need to compile. And when you have a crash, it's native stack traces. It's not your normal JavaScript stack traces. So it's not necessarily something that would be used as a broad brush across your project. It's very much more when you were going to decide to use C++, now you would use this.
Okay, I get that. And just another hot take.
Yeah.
This is a great tool. It's just
amazing.
So I talked with Svetan about this in March. And I was like really excited, and I started talking about like React Native using this. And she said, what are you talking to me about? I'm not a React Native developer. I do this. I do compilers. Like, this is my word. I don't I'm not sure if he said that I don't even know React Native, but like, his job is to find all of these like places where he can make Hermes as good as possible. And like this static Hermes is just mind blowing.
Yeah, and in fact, he talked about even for the interpreted Hermes, like the regular Hermes, that they have potentially the ability to double its speed pretty soon. Like some ideas on that. So they're always working on that. By the way, funny little story. So Charlotte, I forget her last name, but Charlotte gave a great talk about
Charlotte from BAM.
Yeah, from BAM. How React Native works, essentially. How React works.
I loved it.
It was great. And Svetan told her after I was standing there with him, and he said, now I know how React Native works. Okay.
It was really about React. The React rendering behavior.
That's right.
Mental model for React Native behavior. I highly recommend everyone to watch this.
Go check it out.
Yeah, it really refreshed my memory as well. I didn't know about the fibers and like fiber tree, and like, it's great. It has such an amazing visuals, and she's such an amazing speaker. Go check it out right after you check the episode, the crossover episode on the React Native radio and the React Native Show podcast feeds. Static Hermes, probably we can just wrap it up. Core Contributor Summit, we already discussed this. Okay. Oh, this is a big one. One notable missing subject from this conference, 2 days, and we had Nicola Corti on stage several times, new architecture.
Yeah.
I feel like no one was talking about it, either on stage, neither in the coffee machine place. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think it is a big elephant in the room. It's a big topic. I think progress is being made across the board. It's not just internally, but also with third-party libraries. But it feels like maybe maybe there was just a lull in talking about it simply because everybody is so heads down working on what they're trying to bring everything to the new architecture. But you're right. It was kind of interesting. We didn't actually hear a lot about it. Yeah. There was a question in the Q&A about the new architecture. Yeah. Do you remember what the answer was?
So Nico read the question. He asked Eli about it. And Eli just said, Nico, you should tell us about, because Nico is like, I think his role in the core team is actually this. It's actually like new architecture, talking about new architecture, bringing the new architecture. There was some talk about the interop, which is nice.
I think that was huge. The interop. So what the interop is for our listeners, essentially in the beginning, they said new architecture was not going to be compatible with the old architecture. Like you'd have to upgrade.
Again, all or nothing.
All or nothing. Then later they kind of reversed that. It was actually, I think earlier this year, they reversed that decision and they said, nope, we're going to provide an interop layer for everything, even the deprecated methods.
Actually, there are a few steps to this.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, like years ago, when they announced new architecture, it wasn't clear. Like the messaging was, it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
Then if you were watching the React Native community closely, you would see that the new architecture was in the working groups, in the talks, but some libraries like started to use it in just React Native, in just products like Reanimated. What the hell are they using?
Yeah.
So they were using turbo modules, right? The GSI.
Yeah.
And the GSI is half of the new architecture. And you could use that bit just as standalone thing forever.
Right.
But the other part of new architecture, the new views, like Fabric. Yeah. That was all or nothing.
Yeah.
You couldn't use old renderer and new renderer. Yeah. If you tried, you would get a pink box in your in the view hierarchy. And in March, it was announced, like in the RC for 073, I think, that you can do that now.
I want to give a shout out to Rick Hanlon from the Meta core team, who really advocated for the community to get that interop layer in there. I think there was some internal resistance. I don't know exactly who from, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do. But Rick, I think really pushed for, we need this for the community. We need to make sure that that libraries aren't left behind. And this interop layer will allow you to run these libraries on the new architecture.
Yeah, but like I can also see from like the pushback side.
Yeah.
I can also see that you made those steps forward. You are out there. You say, this is great. We should all be using it. Like, please embrace it. We will help you. Nico was saying last year, we will help you. This is the time. This is the time. Let's do that together. And then when people see you taking a step back and say, maybe we can help you out. Like, it's great. I agree, this is great. But like, from the messaging point of view, from like the, how do I say, from the, from the message,
the branding,
branding.
Yeah. And I think that it's a concession to the reality that there are many really popular packages that are not very well maintained. Okay. So things like Expo's stuff is all going to move to the new architecture if it hasn't already. Most of it has. React Native WebView, because of Thibaut, has moved forward to the new architecture through great effort. But there are other libraries that won't make the move, and if you leave them behind, you're going to leave the companies that are relying on those packages behind. They will never upgrade to the new architecture because of it. So it was a concession to reality. Obviously, we all want to use the new stuff, but the good news is that new libraries that are created afterward can all take advantage of the new architecture, and then eventually the older ones will drop off and we'll have new ones take their place.
Yeah, I love it. I love that it's there, and I love the compatibility. And thanks.
Absolutely.
So my voice is going out. Like, I cannot.
I'm surprised you've been able to do as much as you have.
I've been doing this since like Core Contributor Summit.
Yeah.
One first day of the conference, I did a keynote. Today we had Gunter Steiner. I did the Q&A. Like just the networking with people. I cannot just sit out there and like don't talk. I have to talk with people like you, with people like Nico, all of those.
Is this your last speaking engagement of the evening, though?
Oh yeah.
Good.
And then we are going to head to the party.
Yes.
So, what do you do at the end of your podcast usually?
Usually, I ask. I thank the people that are behind the podcast, which I do want to say thank you to Callstack's team here, the React Native Show podcast. I got it. Production team, and as well as thank you, Łukasz, for helping kind of push this together, because I really wanted to do this once I came here to Warsaw. What I then do is I ask Robin, usually, if she has a dad joke, but since she's a mom, it's a mom joke.
Okay.
But we don't have a mom joke available here.
Yeah, so, and also like, I'm tired and my joke would not be funny. And I want this episode to be as good as it possibly can.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it for a long, long time.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan and a listener of React Native Radio.
Mutual, absolutely.
Since I was a junior developer starting with React Native.
I love it.
This podcast gave me a lot of things that I could then talk with my colleagues at the companies that I've been with back then. At the end of our show,
your show,
I usually do this. I usually do the brief, like what we discussed about, I do the thank you, and I say that I'm a huge fan, and I am, and I use your products. I use Ignite.
Yeah.
So
Very cool.
let me do that.
Go ahead.
This was a crossover episode of React Native Radio and the React Native Show podcast. We discussed the conference that we are at right now. We discussed some of the current trends, current themes, new things, old things from React Native community, which we are a part of. And we just had an amazing conversation. I
absolutely love the people at Callstack. We have a great relationship, and we have for many years now, probably 6-7 years now, something like that. It's so awesome to have what I consider a sister company across the Atlantic. And so it's fantastic to do this. Really awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank you.